Okay, so Bon, it's 7:35 if you would want to begin.
Okay. All right. So just formally welcoming everybody here again. So this is not going to be just purely a meditation session, as it's just our first session here together. And just want to take the moment to welcome everybody for taking the time to be present, to join us here. And I understand I said like I want feedback, but one of the rules, or not rules, but guiding things for today's practice is, we all come with our own biases, preconceived notions, judgments, premature cognitive commitments. And, I would encourage everybody to leave them at the door just for the next few moments. And on the way out, everybody can pick them up and take them back with them. And, so they won't lose any of them. But perhaps just for the next few moments, if we can just drop them. And the reason being to feel that sort of lightness in terms of our ideas and thoughts, and all that can be very overwhelming. And I understand we all have our stories and our biographies and our histories and who we are and what we tell ourselves, and and all that is valuable. And the work we do here at the clinic often engages with those stories and gives validation to those stories. But this session today is not exactly like a counseling session at the clinic. This is somewhat of a different thing. And so I encourage people to leave the narrative for now and just come on a little journey or an adventure, if you might. And, you're welcome to leave if you have to go. But, I encourage you to come to the adventure from a place of an open heart and to just be curious. Now, I haven't, in a conventional sense, prepared for this session, writing anything down. And this is all from the heart, and hence the heart-fulness practice. And so the primary or core sort of thing that we want to do here today has something to do with remembering. And remembering not in the sense of memorizing, but remembering in the sense of being reminded, in the sense of being aware, in the sense of not forgetting. And so the immediate question being, what is that we are to remember? Well, there are many things that in the course of a day that we try to remember and try to forget. But again, this sort of thing that we're doing today is, and the words that I am speaking to you, I'm hoping not to speak to your brain, to your thinking mind, but hopefully to go a little bit beyond that. And so do not take this as me speaking as an authority or telling you of what to do, but more of like, take it as almost, to quote Aristotle, he says, the mark of an educated mind is to entertain an idea without accepting it. So I'm not asking you to accept any of what I'm saying, but I'm asking you to entertain it. And that's really what I want. That's really what I mean, is that I want you to be entertained in a way. And this, you can see it, and I would think that this would be the right attitude, to see it as almost being entertained for the next few, like half hour or so. And the entertainment is not in the sense that this is not important, but in the sense of that this is very important. In other words, to be serious about having fun. And so this is kind of what it is. And so the reason I call it entertainment is also because this is not about me giving you some information either. The notion here is not to transfer information to you, but rather we are speaking of perhaps having a different attitude in the next few moments that we will be spending with each other. And it is in this spirit that I invite you today, and I welcome you to yourself in a paradoxical way. I welcome you to yourself. And as we are all sitting wherever we are, whenever we are, however we are, we can just take a few moments to just experience this here-ness. And what I mean by that is something simple and yet something simultaneously not always easy to comprehend. So I'll try to enter from different angles and give some examples of what I mean. So then you see that as I speak, you hear certain sounds, and simultaneously it evokes certain images in your mind and perhaps judgments and all the rest of the cognitive complicated machinery that we are. And yet, at the same time, there is something that we are forgetting in every moment. And it is that to which I want to remind us of. And it's something that's happening right under our noses all the time, all the time. And to give an example, if you were to bring your attention playfully just to your chest, you'll see that there is an ongoing boop, 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 and it could be boop, boop, or it could be faster. But there is an ongoing beating of the heart continuously, simultaneously unfolding as I speak and you listen. And that, now this sounds very impractical at some level, like what in the name of the Holy Lord is this guy talking about? But at the same time, it's extremely, extremely pragmatic, because if that heart was not beating in this very moment in parallel, co-parallel to what this experience of us talking and listening, you wouldn't be able to do much of that at all. In fact, you wouldn't be on this Zoom call. And, so that is a visceral and very pragmatic thing, that the beating of the heart is integral, and yet something that we don't often think about. We go around our days beating our hearts all day long and never aware that we're doing it, and the heart, the beating of the heart is just a sign of so many other such hidden processes unfolding moment to moment. And so, for instance, the heart beating isn't just the heart beating, it's also the blood circulating to every little nook and corner and cell of our bodies. You see, the arteries, the veins, the capillaries, the blood is being carried moment to moment to every single part of our body, from head to toe, on, unendingly, unceasingly. And all this intricate machinery unfolding with just under our nose, us completely unaware, going about our day, thinking of how much life sucks. You see? So for us to be able to realize how much our life sucks, whether because of the ongoing pandemic or because of the destruction of the environment or because of the villainy of the political parties that they're visiting upon the other weaker people of the world, or because of any specific circumstances in our life, all that and our experience of all that wouldn't even be possible without this subtle or layer upon layer of phenomena unfolding right under our nose, right under our heart. And yet we remain peacefully unaware of all of this. And so therefore, this heartful practice is sort of an invitation for awareness. It's an invitation to remember. That's what I meant by remember. To remember what we knew already, but had forgotten. What we can become aware of from moment to moment, and then forget, and then become aware of again. And so this is an ongoing, oscillating sort of practice where throughout our waking life, all this is unfolding since even before we left the womb of our mothers. And so on it goes and on it flows. Like the Tao Te Ching says, the great Tao flows to the left and to the right in all directions, you see? And this is what's going on with us as well. So this is an invitation to just find that which is already there. And so this is not an invitation to add or subtract. This is not an invitation for becoming, but this is an invitation for being. And paradoxically, you see, I'm talking a lot, but the reason for it is that I want to set the fundamental, foundational elements in place before we practice. When I started on the practice of meditation, I was lost for many, many years and went in many, many different directions and bounced around for a long, long time. And so having the right sort of mindset is actually sometimes more important than the practice itself. Although the practice is extremely important, if we are not set right in our intention, then our practice also suffers. And so this is really an invitation to work on our intention as well, as to what exactly it is that we are intending. And here now I would like to make a distinction between a goal, something we want to achieve, something we want to possess, something we want to have, and something that we are just gently intending. And so here then, we are again in the territory of attitude versus information. So again, the practice of heartfulness, also sometimes called mindfulness, really from the root that we have sati from Pali, although Pali is not the word name for the language, but that's usually what people call it, is that it's the practice of doing exactly this attitudinal aspect to heartfulness, to mindfulness. And the attitudinal aspect is the very reason that we chose the name of heartfulness versus mindfulness. And the reason being, as sometimes we can do things mindfully in the sense that we can be fully aware of what we're doing, and yet our attitude might be misplaced. And so here then, there's an element of intention, there's an element of attitude, and finally, and only then finally, the element of attention, which we often hear in whenever we hear of mindfulness. And you may have noticed that I haven't even talked about attention, but I have been speaking more so to intention and attitude. And the attitude really here has to do with elements that we often associate with the heart. You see, things that often are associated with heartfelt feelings. So things like kindness, and things like patience, and things like openness, and things like curiosity, and things like forgiveness. And all this moment to moment, to ourselves mostly, than to others. And it could be both, but it all starts, as they say, at home. And another reason for choosing the word heartfulness here is because, you see, one of the major components of this attitude that we are trying to find out about and to discover together is that, you know, a aspect that often people do not necessarily consider in relation to the heart, and that is that of courage. Yes, courage. Courage, it seems, is one of the most fundamental and foundational heartfulness values. In fact, the word courage has its root in Latin, which is also the root for the French courir, which is in French literally your heart. So, in other words, the word courage comes from the word for heart in Latin. And so, what we here have is that courage comes from the heart. And so, if some of you here have a neuroscientific background and are somehow cursing me for not knowing my basics and thinking, hey, it's the amygdala that's the seat of the emotion, and I would just remind you to leave those judgments and those ideas at the door for now. And on your way back, you can pick them up again. So here I'm speaking of heartfulness as much literally as I'm speaking metaphorically. And so in that spirit, then, I invite you guys again, finally, to see if you could just gently bring your attention to the part of your body where your heart is beating. And by this, I do not mean to conceptually think of your heart beating, but to feel your heart beating. And if you find that hard, and you find that you do not have the sensitivity at the moment to viscerally feel your heart beating, then I invite you to just notice the inflow and outflow of the breath from your nostrils. And if you can do that, that can slowly take you down a few staircases until you can feel your heart beating as well. So whichever one you are comfortable with, setting yourself with the intention to put yourself in these heartful values and having the attitude of these values, see if you can just attend to the ongoing inflow and outflow of your breath. And if you notice that you're breathing deeply, then just recognizing that you're breathing deeply. And if you notice that you're breathing in a shallow manner, then just realizing you're breathing in that manner. The exercise is not here to manipulate the breath, but to notice it rather. And the word spirit has its root in what is we call the breath in Latin. And so is the ruh in Arabic, or ruach in Hebrew, is also has to do with breathing. And so our ancestors truly did understand that breathing was the source of life in our case. And while you're experiencing your breathing, while you're feeling your breath enter, leave your body, recognizing that this breath is nourishing the billions of cells, the billion cell orchestra in your being through the simple act of inhaling and exhaling. And so if you thought you didn't do something great today, perhaps think again, you have been breathing. While you're breathing, perhaps also noticing any other sensations in the body, the feeling of pressure or touch as your body experiences the floor, the contact with the floor or the chair or the couch or the sofa that you're on. Perhaps the sensations in your hands, what it feels like to have hands. Most importantly, if you can feel your heart. It's been beating since before you left the womb, and it's been beating without asking for anything in return, unceasingly serving you without even drawing attention to its integral function. And if you start to drift away, feel sleepy, just remind yourself that you're sitting here and just breathing and just enjoying the breath and coming in and out. And while you continue this, I'm just going to give you some reminders. For often during the practice, especially if you start to get regular, people start getting questions. What am I doing? Why am I wasting my time sitting here? I could be doing something, quote unquote, productive. I could be this, I could be that. And so I'll tell you a little story. There's two pilots, and they're really good at what they do. And They fly these planes and they're absolutely great at their job. And they're mostly flying these planes around the region of what we call Florida and like southern United States. Then one of these days, they're asked to take a flight out to either New York or I think Canada. Couldn't be sure. And unfortunately, tragedy hit and the plane crashed. Not a single person in this room is not acquainted with tragedy. And yet every new tragedy is fresh, just like this breath. So is every smile and every feeling of joy. And so they did some investigation into why this happened. For these were really good pilots. And they couldn't find out. And after almost the investigation was shut down, then somebody noticed something right under the hood, right under the nose, just like your heart and your breath that we continuously ignore and aren't aware of, despite their integral roles. And it was that these pilot and the co-pilot, as you know, they go through these checking system every day before the plane goes. They have to go through this checking system. They has to say, okay, this, and he says check this, and he says check, and this he says. So they're all checking. And they did their routine as usual, and they went through that list, and the co-pilot said check to every one single one of them. And there was nothing different from the time they've done it many hundred times before, except that this time they were flying to a colder climate where there was going to be snow. And so when it was time to check the part of the plane that is responsible for keeping the plane safe during such flights in cold regions, but the pilots went on autopilot and they mindlessly also said check because they had said check 100 times before. And now the very thing that the habit that was so helpful for them actually led to tragedy. And so I'm not trying to scare you here, but I'm trying to remind you that often we forget the importance of being mindful because it seems so trivial. And yet, forgetfulness and not remembering the moment-to-moment happenings right under the hood can have devastating consequences sometimes. And so this is an admonition to see that sometimes the most simplest things are the most important, and also sometimes the hardest. So as we continue to listen to our bodies in this way, paying attention from moment to moment in whatever is unfolding in a non-judgmental way, we can also allow ourselves to step into some of these attitudinal values. For yes, mindfulness and heartfulness is a practice in training our attention, but it's also a practice in training our attitude to orient ourselves towards a certain kind of kindness towards our own selves. Sort of kind of like a loving mother embracing you. You try and see and do it for yourself. And so in conclusion, I'd invite you again to just imagine yourself as a little child, little baby, and truly find some love for that little infant and tell her or tell him or tell whatever pronoun is to, I'm here for you. Try and embrace that little child with the strength of your current grown up being. See if you can tell yourself, hey, life's going to be challenging, man. Hey, I'm going to be here for you no matter what. It's going to be tough. It's not always going to be easy, but I'll be here for you. See if you can have just a little ounce of kindness towards that infant. And perhaps if we could have more of that, this effect of being kind to ourselves